Okay, so now we're going to look at how you can create more of the spark on your dates. So remember, I'm big on coaching you how to take more personal responsibility for your dating life. And we are in the school of thought here tonight that the spark isn't just a mystical event that happens to us once every so often, but it's actually something that we can proactively create for ourselves. And if you don't quite believe me yet, I want you to think back to a time in your life where you perhaps experienced the spark a lot. For me, it was probably when I was about 16 at secondary school. For others of you out there, it might have been when you were traveling or backpacking or when you met your first love. Now, if we think about how our mindset was then versus when we fast forward in time, we're now probably a little bit more mature, have had a few life experiences. We're just not the same people as we were perhaps earlier on in our lives. And because of that, it may take us a little bit longer to open up to people, to trust people, to form relationships. And this isn't a bad thing. This could mean that we're actually making smarter choices in our love lives. However, it's good to remember that the spark is something that can be built. So we don't feel like we're going to constantly have to settle for not experiencing that. But instead, it's about recognizing that the key to experiencing it really lies within ourselves. I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but it's true. So during this section, I'm going to be giving you 5 little techniques that you can start to use to try and bring more spark into your dates. And as I said, even if you go onto a date and you're not 100% convinced this person is your traditional type, I would highly recommend trying just a little bit, even for the point of view of having a more enjoyable experience and a more fun evening getting to know one another, to just try and put a little bit more spark and a little bit more opportunity creation into your interactions. So the first skill that we're going to look at around this is a skill around being playful. So we know that being playful, having fun, having a laugh, having banter, that's one of the best parts about going on a date. It's a little bit of escapism from what has been, let's admit it, a bit of a gloomy 2020. So in order to harness that playfulness, sometimes playfulness comes very naturally to people, but if you're not one of the people that it comes very naturally to, there's a really neat little skill and technique that you can learn to make your interactions more playful. And that really comes down to learning about mismatching how you say things and what you say. So for instance, if I was just to say to you, I never want to see you again, and I say it very deadpan and very serious, the only meaning you can take from that is, I don't want to see you again. That's not very nice. Instead, however, if you go a bit more over the top and you really increase how you are expressing things, so you're smiling, you're making eye contact, your voice tonality goes higher, you become more expressive, people could easily understand that that's a joke and you're being playful. So you could say, of course, I would absolutely never want to see you ever again. So if you say that and you see that there's that mismatch between how you're expressing something and actually what you say, then this immediately creates a little bit of playfulness. And this playfulness is really a superpower to have on your dates because it's very handy as a skill when you want to communicate a boundary. Now, a boundary is where you're showing that you may or may not be happy about something. And when we go into dating, it's highly important to have boundaries for ourselves because they really show that we're going into that dating experience protecting ourselves and that we have really good self-esteem, which is very attractive. So if we are demonstrating that we have a boundary, a good way to do this in a way that isn't going to be off-putting to the other person and is actually going to draw them in more is by incorporating some playfulness. So say your date is always a few minutes late. Now, as we know, people have very different ideas around punctuality. Some people absolutely love being on time. Other people are constantly on a different time zone. They're like GMT plus 15 minutes or something. And if you are on a date with somebody like that and you want to express that maybe, hey, you've noticed that they're always being a little bit late, but you want to do that in a way that's playful and creates a bit of spark, then you want to use this mismatch. So instead of saying, I love how you always keep me waiting, you go, I love how you always keep me waiting. You also notice, instead of saying, you always keep me waiting, which could sound accusational, by saying, I love how you always keep me waiting, you're using that really playful, warm way of expressing the same thing. And by adding that really fun tone of voice, it's a nice way to gently tease a person whilst also still putting your boundaries across. So the second skill that I'm going to go through tonight with you is sort of linked to this, and it's really about being okay to have some points of disagreement. Now, if you do meet someone that you really like and you're really keen on impressing them, then it can be tricky to feel comfortable with having points of disagreement. The reason behind that is just simply you will want to impress the other person, you don't want to put them off or scare them off or any of that bad stuff. And so because of that, you may find yourself slipping into being very, very agreeable. Now, of course, being agreeable is a nice quality. However, sometimes if we're too agreeable, it actually stops us from creating as much spark as we could do on our dates. The reason for this is when we're too agreeable, we sort of are indicating that regardless of what the other person contributes to the interaction, regardless of what they do, we like them anyway. So perhaps it makes our interest come across as slightly less sincere. And remember, everyone wants and needs to feel, and it also should be the truth, that you only want to continue connecting with the person because you're really enjoying the process of getting to know them. Because of this, instead of being too agreeable, I want you to feel okay to express a difference of opinion if you're doing it again in that playful tone. So say someone talks to you about their love of skiing, and in your mind you're thinking, oh my God, you wouldn't catch me going down a mountain slope, you couldn't pay me to do that. That would actually be a brilliant thing to say. So you could say to someone like, any chance I could convince you to ditch the skiing and we could just maybe go on a summer holiday instead? Or how much money do I have to pay you to give that up? Or you're going to have to do a lot of arm twisting to agree for me to go skiing with you. Or, okay, let's have a deal. I'll go skiing with you, but you're buying the hot chocolates. So do you notice here, a lot of the words and a lot of the phrases that I'm using, they're all about kind of playful challenge and playful negotiation. It's like, can I convince you? You're going to have to twist my arm. Okay, it's a deal. Or is there any chance that we can do this instead? So it almost sounds a little bit like bartering, but what you're doing here is you are expressing a difference of opinion, but again, in a way that's still fun, that's still playful, that's still warm, and is also still showing the other person that, of course, you're open to doing the activities that they're interested in, but you also have your own life that you're proud of and that you value, which you're not in a rush to give up just because you've met someone that you're attracted to. Because of that, it's really important that you get used to having moments of playful disagreement with someone and that you stay strong with having your own opinion, because your own opinion really says that you've got a life that you're proud of, and it again demonstrates some really good self-esteem. And you would be surprised sometimes by having these little moments of disagreement, rather than it creating conflict, a lot of the time it's exactly the thing that will create that moment of spark on your dates. Now, you may have noticed when I was giving those examples, I actually used yet another spark creation technique there. I said, oh, is there any chance we can ditch the winter ski holiday and go for a nice summer beach holiday instead? Now, this spark creation technique is all around how you can use an image of the future to gently show and suggest to someone all the amazing things you could do together. So this is particularly great if you are very commitment focused and you're wanting in a kind of subtle and fun way to show the other person that you are on some level thinking about having a longer term relationship or potentially even a longer term relationship with them. Now, the key here really is when we are talking about future experiences that we'd like to have with a person, we really want to make them a little bit over the top. Because if we are too serious about this, again, this could be misconstrued like you're really thinking about going on holiday with them next summer. And again, that might be just a bit too much pressure too early on in the dating experience. So instead, what we want to be conscious of is we want to keep the time frame very vague. So this is where you're being a little bit mysterious. So instead of saying, how do you feel about going on a holiday in June? Maybe too much pressure. You could say, I think it'd be so much fun to go on a holiday one day. Or I could just see you just chilling out on a beach lounger with a good book. So when you create this image, first of all, the image in itself is very appetizing. It creates a bit of romance because rather than us having sort of lockdown video dates, it creates an amazing image of how much fun you could potentially have together in the future. So that makes your interaction slightly more exciting. And of course, it does hint that you have feelings for the other person or are becoming more attracted to them. And again, that subtle little hint that you're giving, again, can be enough to create a bit of a spark of excitement. But you're taking the pressure off by making it, instead of it being about a definite plan, it's instead about something that you'd like to do at some mystical point in the future. So you use expressions like someday or one day. You're just putting the idea out there. And remember, you're waiting to see how someone responds. So you wouldn't then go to book those plane tickets until you get that really nice response and that feedback loop from the other person, which shows you that they're actually on the same wavelength as you. We also want to keep that image, as I said, pleasantly over the top. Because of this, what you want to do is you want to exaggerate a bit. So instead of saying, oh, you're not expecting me to go on skiing with you next month, too serious, instead you could say something like, oh my gosh, I can feel a ski holiday coming on at some point in my future, and I'm not sure, I'm starting to feel nervous already. So again, we want to go over the top, and we want to make it about a non-definite period of time. So that future projection does create mystery, and it does indicate to the other person that you're starting to quite like them. Now, the fourth technique is one that is particularly useful when you're messaging a person. Now, I know, particularly in the world of online dating, from the first moment you send a message to someone on Match to maybe after you've swapped phone numbers, messaging tends to be an area of dating that people really worry about, and that people can feel like they don't know how to get it right. Because of that, what we want to do is we want to be using and thinking about how we can use text messages in a way that's really flirtatious. So a good thing to think about here, this is building on maybe some of the other learning that we've done together through Match. And if you're already a Match member, you can of course watch those videos still online around how to send great messages and supercharge your online dating profile. When we've got those messages, it's to think about how you can express yourself in a way that's original and unique and interesting. And the start of this will often come down to just changing how you express something and expressing something in a way that's a little bit more original. So for instance, if someone asks you and says, are you free for dinner next Friday? You could, of course, just respond, yes, sounds good, or yes, in my diary. And there's nothing wrong with that as a response. But if you did want to create a little bit more flirtation, what you can do instead is you could say something like, I've got a busy day on at work that day, but I am very tempted. Or your company in Chinese food, I can't resist. So I want you to notice here that just by chucking in a word like temptation, tempted, or resist, it makes the message suddenly seem so much more exciting than it actually is. So think a lot when you're writing your messages about your word selection. Can you select words and ways of expressing yourself that are a little bit more unique? As I said, I want when that person gets that message from you, I want them to be smiling when your name flashes up on that screen. And sometimes it really is as simple as you putting some thought into your messages and using some more original words in there that show, again, that you have that playfulness and that informality, which really helps set the stage to have that spark. So finally, before we move on to our final section, I want to take a look at also the importance of changing up explicit compliments for implied compliments. So if you are a little bit uncertain right now about exactly the right way to take that first step forwards, and you are conscious that you don't want to come on too strong, because of that, what you can do is you can think about swapping from explicit compliments, which is something like, you've got great eyes, to a compliment that is implied. So an implied compliment could be something like, I've actually never told someone that in a while. You're not directly telling a person that you feel a lot of emotional intimacy with them and you feel close to them, but it's strongly implied through what you're saying. And sometimes when we imply a compliment, rather than say it outright, and the other person has to have a little think about what you meant when you said that, Again, that creates that curiosity and that mystery, which can help feel very exciting in an interaction. Likewise, you could say, I took one look at your profile and I knew I had to message you. Again, this would be, I wouldn't probably say that in a first message, but you could definitely say it on a first date. And again, that doesn't say, I think you're really attractive directly, but it's certainly implied. And sometimes implied compliments allow us to make that little move forwards, but in a way that isn't quite so direct and quite so overwhelming. It allows us to test the water. So I'd really advise that if you are trying to think about making that first compliment to someone, try an implied compliment, and that will often it'll feel a little bit smoother, and also makes you probably also focus more on their qualities and what they brought to the interaction. But I've got a whole section coming up about compliments in our next chapter, so we're going to be looking exactly how to pay a killer compliment. But before we get to that, let's take a quick recap of this chapter. So remember, if you are thinking about creating the spark, it's important to value yourself and your own opinion. So don't be afraid to be more challenging and playfully disagree. And we also love to create a little bit of mystery and a little bit of curiosity on the way. So before our final chapter, let's just take a look at some more questions. Thank you so much for sending these in.